Welcome back. All right, so today I want to take a look at the picture in the East, how teams are doing in the Eastern Conference. And so what I've got here is I've got the 8 teams that are below the playoff line, because I want to talk about the 8 teams below the playoff line and focus on them. And then I can briefly touch on the teams that are above the playoff line and which ones might be more susceptible to falling out of the playoffs as the season rolls along. The top team that's below the playoff line, the team I'm wearing, the New York Islanders. Currently 14-10-3 for 31 points. Their points percentage, .574. In terms of injuries, 2 big names that are currently out, Palmieri and Pajot. And of course, Palmieri, it's going to be a long time before we see him back in the lineup for the New York Islanders. Now, their upcoming schedule, not too daunting in that they have 1 game at home against Colorado. That's daunting. Then they go on the road for 2. They play in Tampa and Florida. Tampa's playing really well. Florida has been very up and down. Then they come home for the next 3 against Vegas, Anaheim, and there's Tampa again. So if they can play well against Tampa over the next few weeks, they've got a chance to maybe get themselves above the playoff line. And according to Money Puck, they're given the best odds of the teams that are currently below the playoff line at 49.7%. I know it's still early in the season, but it's fun to look at the percentages, especially when the Athletics are so very different than Money Puck's. The Athletic gives the Islanders a 24% chance at a playoff spot. So where are the Islanders playing well? In terms of scoring by period, it's about even. 21 goals for and 22 goals against in the first period. 28 goals scored, 28 goals against in the second period. 25 goals scored, 25 goals against in the third period. In overtime, they've scored 3 times. They've allowed none. So very efficient at that 3-on-3. If they score first, and they've done so 15 out of their 27 games, they're pretty darn good. 10-3-2. If they trail first, not bad. Through the 12 games, 4-7-1. That's not an awful record when you're trailing first. Sorokin, in terms of goals saved above expected, 14.7 currently. Riddick with 6.1. So if you're looking at goaltending, the Islanders have been very good in net, and it's not a huge surprise under Coach Patrick Roy that you'd have good goaltending. Their defense has been good as well. Their general manager, Matthew Darch, has had a lot of rave reviews in the job that he's done thus far this year, and that should continue. I think the New York Islanders have probably the best chance of the teams currently below the playoff line to end up making it in, so reason why I'm wearing Islanders and all that. But the percentages are very, very close to one another when we get into these teams, and we'll move on to Detroit. So now with Detroit's numbers, Detroit's also played 27 games, a record of 14-11-2, so almost the same record as the Islanders. 30 points and a points percentage of .556. The Detroit Red Wings, the only injury of note as I'm recording this is Mason Appleton. So they've been relatively healthy. Their next 6 games are on the road, so they have to play well in this road trip. They're in Columbus, then they're in Seattle, so that's a bit of a trip right there. Then they play in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Chicago. So at the very least, it makes sense geographically to go from Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary to Edmonton. That makes a lot of sense. I've seen some road trips this year that have been a nightmare, where you go from Alberta to BC, back to Alberta, and then down to Seattle. Absolutely insane scheduling there. So while it is a 6-game road trip, there are some teams on this road trip that could be tough for Detroit, but it's a winnable road trip. It's one that they should come out of this, I would think, at least 3-3. If they're going to make the playoffs, that's kind of what they got to do. Now, according to Money Puck, they have a 47.8% chance of making the playoffs. According to the Athletic, it's a 21% chance. So they're given a little bit lower chances by both, but the 47.8, it's not too bad. Now, the first period's been tough for Detroit. They've been outscored 24-13. They've got to turn that around, and we'll get into first goals as well. They've scored 37 in the second period and allowed 31. So the long change has benefited them. However, in the third period, they're outscored 36-28. So first and third, they're outscored. In the overtime, they've outscored the opposition 2-1. Again, the long change seems to benefit the Detroit Red Wings. If they score first, they're 8-3-1. So they've scored first 12 out of the 27 games, meaning 15 times they've trailed first. Not an awful record of 6-8-1 if they trail first, but again, you don't want to be trailing first that often, so it's one of those things. It's not as bad as some of the numbers we've seen over the years, but it is something to keep an eye on, is that scoring first. Talbot, 2.4 goals saved above expected. He's been good, not necessarily fantastic. Gibson has struggled. Negative 5.8 goals saved above expected. So when we're talking about goaltending, it is something for Detroit that I believed would be a positive, which so far this season has not been the positive that I had hoped for the Detroit Red Wings. Todd McLellan is the head coach. We know McLellan can be a very good coach. General manager Steve Yzerman, there's still some pressure on Yzerman here. I think with how close they are to a playoff spot, with the right moves they can get there, and it's up to Yzerman to make those right moves. So, yeah, Detroit's not in an awful position right now when it comes to the playoffs. But let's discuss the Rangers. 14-12-2 record. So these records are very similar to one another. 30 points for the Rangers, 536 points percentage. And in terms of injuries, they're going to miss Fox for a while. And, of course, Quick's been out for a bit as well. So this means that Shesterkin plays all the games. And then their upcoming schedule, it's not bad. They have one game on the road against Ottawa. Then they come home for two. The home games are against Colorado and Vegas. So, of course, we know what Colorado does. They don't lose. Vegas seems to be getting better. Then they go on the road for one against Chicago, and then they're at home for three. So they're at home for three against Montreal, Anaheim, and Vancouver. 3 winnable games if they've really and truly got their home game going. It is important to note they did get that win over Dallas. That was a come-from-behind victory. That could be a one that turns the tide at least a bit for them. Their odds of making the playoffs, according to Money Puck, 47.9%, so 0.1% chance better than Detroit. However, The Athletic is more bullish on them, 40% chance, according to The Athletic. So while 40% still below 50, it's definitely higher than 21 or 24. So the Rangers given good odds. In the first period, the Rangers are outscored 26-23. Second period, they like the long change too. They outscore their opposition 21-17. In the third period, they're slightly outscored 28-27. In the overtime, they're slightly ahead there, outscoring the opposition 3-2. If they score first, and they've done so in half their games, they're very good, 12-2. If they don't, then they probably lose. They're 2-10-2 when they trail first. So the Rangers need to turn that storyline around as well. They need to be a little better when they're trailing first, or just score first more often than they don't. Shesterkin, 14.2 goals saved above expected. His numbers are ridiculous. Jonathan Quick, 6.7 goals saved above expected. Their goaltending is excellent. So if there's a reason that we can look at the Rangers and the Islanders as the forerunners of these teams that are below the playoff line, goaltending is kind of where that starts. There's other factors as well, but goaltending is definitely where that starts. The Rangers coach, of course, Mike Sullivan. One name that came to mind while I was putting this board together is Paul Maurice. The first year Paul Maurice took over behind the bench in Florida, things didn't go well for that first half of season. And then all of a sudden, Florida bought in, they made the playoffs, and they went on a bit of a run when they made the playoffs. I'm not saying that the Rangers are going to do that under Mike Sullivan, but there's the possibility. Mike Sullivan has been a very successful coach over his time behind the bench, and the New York Rangers are seen as a pretty talented team that underachieves. Their general manager, Chris Drury, there has to be some pressure on him to help to get things going with the New York Rangers, because if firing the coach doesn't work and you can't just trade out all the players, it can then end up going back on the general manager, where you're like, hey, what's the deal here and why haven't things turned around? And Drury has to have a good answer for that. So we move on to Boston. Boston, 28 games played, 15-13 record, 30 points. Also, 536 points percentage, the same as the Rangers. Pastrnak is out. McAvoy's been out for a while. McAvoy, of course, took a puck to the face, needed surgery after that, so ouch. Pastrnak, they're being really cagey about Pasta's injury. We just know from one game to the next whether or not he's going to play, and they're not getting into it. But clearly this isn't just some minor, day-to-day kind of injury, so that is concerning. For a Boston team that does rely on him for their scoring, that is very concerning. Their next two are at home against St. Louis and New Jersey. Winnable games? Yes. St. Louis well out of the playoff picture in the West. At least if you look at points percentages, if you look at just straight points, nobody's really truly out of it. New Jersey has been in a bit of a nosedive since Jack Hughes' injury. Last night during the New Jersey game, they were showing like rush chances and slot chances and all this kind of stuff for New Jersey with Hughes and without. Absolutely ridiculous, the difference. So that's a winnable game for Boston. Then they go on the road for 3. They play in St. Louis, in Winnipeg, and in Minnesota. So they're going to get to know the Blues over the next week. They're going to be visiting a struggling Winnipeg Jets team as well. And then Minnesota, where I presume they probably take a loss, but that means that of their next 5 games, they could go 4-1. The odds, 39.3% chance they make the playoffs according to Money Puck. 10% chance according to The Athletic. So The Athletic's model is very sour on the Boston Bruins, and I get it. I do. The Bruins are a team that I get it. And we'll talk about the goals here. Outscored 29-20 in the first period. They outscored their opposition in the second period 30-26. What is it with the teams in this column and being pretty good in the second period? Third period, they lose again. 36-31, they're being outscored there. In the overtime, they've outscored their opposition 4-0. Obviously, there's a nothing there because they have no overtime or shootout losses at this stage of the season. So Boston's pretty good 3-on-3, and they're pretty good with the long change, comparatively speaking, with the short changes of the first and third period, where they shortchange themselves. Now, if they score first, they're 9-4. If they trail first, they're 6-9. So not awful numbers in general. Everything with Boston just feels kind of in the middle to mediocre. Coach Marco Sturm, I think Sturm's done a remarkable job. When you look at this lineup and you look at the expectations coming into this season, I think they've done a remarkable job as a team, and it's Marco Sturm that I think deserves a lot of credit for getting as many points out of this team as he has. For general manager Don Sweeney, it was obvious in the offseason that missing the playoffs again was not the plan. They were expecting to build themselves back into a playoff spot. It does feel like Don Sweeney's really quite tight with Cam Neely, and it would be an absolute shock if Sweeney's job was in any kind of danger. But if Boston misses the playoffs again, could it be? I mean, again, I don't think so, but you just never know. We get over to Columbus. We go into this second column here. 26 games played, 12-9-5 record, 29 points. Their .558 points percentage is actually better than Detroit, the Rangers, and Boston, who are ahead of them on the board. So you're looking at points percentage. There you go. Olivier is the one player they have that's injured. So what's interesting, too, is these teams below the playoff line, not dealing with injuries, most of them. We'll get Florida, but most of them not dealing with like major injuries that are crippling to their lineup. So is that problematic? Because eventually we know that these injuries do show up, like Boston's with Pastrnak and McAvoy. So their upcoming schedule at home against Detroit, just the one game. Then they go on the road for 3. Florida, Washington, Carolina. There aren't any gimmies there. Washington is playing really well. You know, with Carolina, you got to work for it. And Florida is very unpredictable. But I'm still expecting Florida to get better. In terms of the odds, well, Money Puck's not sold on Columbus. 34.2% chance they make it. The Athletic is kind of sold on Columbus. Their model, 49%, which is one of the higher numbers on the board in terms of making the playoffs. So they do like Columbus. And if you look at the scoring by period, they outscore their opposition 18-17 in the first. They also outscore their opposition 29-26 in the second. The problem is the third. They get outscored 37-26 in the third period, and then they get outscored 4-2 in overtime. So as the game goes on, Columbus seems to get worse. That's not a recipe for success, but it is something that can get fixed. If they score first, they're 8-1-3. That number's pretty good. If they trail first, they're 4-8-2. So that's not great. So score first. They've done it 12 out of 26 games so far. Greaves has still been as advertised. 9.4 goals saved above expected. Elvis Merzlikins is having a nice bounce back himself. 1.9 goals saved above expected. Their coach, Dean Evison. I still like Dean Evison. I think he's a good coach. Their general manager, Don Waddell. I would think there's got to be some pressure on Waddell to make sure that this team at least stays in the hunt for a playoff spot as late into the season as possible. If not, actually jump above that line and get a playoff spot. It's been too long since Columbus was in the playoffs. And I say that even though I know there's other teams that have been out of the playoffs longer that are on the board right now. Toronto. I didn't expect Toronto to be at this low point in the standings this late in the season. 26 games, 12-11-3 record, 27 points, 519 points percentage. So a lot to look at here. The points percentage not fantastic. Carlo, of course, has been away for a while now. It looks like he's probably going to need surgery. He's going to be away for quite a while longer. They have one game away from home, which is against Carolina, and then they're at home for 5. Toronto has an opportunity here with this 5-game homestand to get their season rolling. They're against Montreal, Tampa Bay, San Jose, Edmonton, and Chicago. So if you look at teams on this list as, okay, which ones are above the playoff line, Montreal is, though just barely, and Tampa Bay, of course, number one in the division. But outside of that, you've got San Jose, Edmonton, Chicago. So those are winnable games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they're at home. So they should be able to do that. Now, the odds are very, very split. Money Puck gives the Toronto Maple Leafs a 16.6% chance currently of making the playoffs, whereas the Athletic, 49%. The Athletic more sold on Toronto by a lot than Money Puck. If you look at their scoring by period, they outscore their opposition 27-25 in the first period, so that's not the problem. It's the long change where there is a problem. They're outscored 34-25 in second periods. Third period, they outscore the opposition 33-28, and in overtime, they outscore the opposition 4-3. That second period, it's just they've got to fix that. You fix that, and you keep everything else the same. They could very well be a playoff team. So if they score first and they don't do it often enough, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. They're 5-5-1 when they score first. That's odd. And what's odd is if they trail first, they have a better record, 7-6-2. So 15 out of 26 games they've trailed first. They're one game above NHL 500 if they trail first. They're 500 if they score first. That's odd. Very, very strange. So Toronto needs to get those first goals and maintain their lead. That's the important thing. So goaltending, Woll has been very good since coming back from injury. 4.1 goals saved above expected. Hildeby's been good too. 3.9 goals saved above expected. Stolarz at the time of the injury, not looking great. Negative 5.3 goals saved above expected. Caden Primo, of course, came in and played for a bit after Stolarz got hurt. Negative 6.8 goals saved above expected. So Primo, not fantastic numbers there. And for Toronto, the goaltending has been an adventure. This season's been an adventure. Coach Craig Berube, I don't know if he'd agree with me that it's been an adventure, but I feel like it has been. And I think Berube's done as well as he can. General manager Brad Treliving seems to be saying all the right things too. I don't know how much patience there's going to be in Toronto if this team is still below the playoff line in, say, a month. And by patience, I mean, could be media, could be fans, could be players, anybody. But I don't think Toronto being below the playoff line is acceptable. Considering the amount of money that these guys get, it's not really all that acceptable. Buffalo, 27 games, 11-12-4 record, 26 points. So they're below NHL 500 at 481 for their points percentage. Kessel rings their one injury. Of course, he was injured to start the season, came back briefly, and then got hurt again. Their next 5 are on the road. So the Buffalo Sabres have to make hay on the road. It didn't get off to a good start with that game against Philadelphia last night. Now from here, they're in Winnipeg. So they've played Winnipeg. They've beaten Winnipeg. Can they beat them again? Then they're in Calgary. So at the very least, the first 2 games on this road trip look winnable. Then they're in Edmonton. Similar story, right? And then they're in Vancouver. Well, we know they're going to beat Vancouver. And then they're in Seattle. So it's a 5-game road trip, but it's not like they're against this juggernaut of great teams when they're on the 5-game road trip. If Buffalo's going to change the narrative, if they're going to finally break through and do something, this 5-game road trip has to be where it starts. Almost choked on just even the thought of it. The models don't like the Sabres' chances. 11% from Money Puck in terms of their odds of making the playoffs, whereas 25% from Athletic. One thing that's interesting is the Athletics giving better odds to Buffalo than they are to Detroit or the Islanders at this stage of the season. Or Boston. So that's something for Buffalo fans, right? Got something to hold on to. So scoring by period, they get outscored in the first period 30-24, so not great numbers there. They do outscore their opposition 29-24 in the second period, and then they get outscored in the third by a score of 34-27. So this is another team below the playoff line that during that long change in the second period, it seems to benefit them. Doesn't benefit them in overtime. They've been outscored 4-1 in overtimes. If they score first, they've only done that 10 out of their 27 games, but they've got a good record. 7-2-1 when they score first. They do not have a good record if they trail first. 4-10-3 when they're trailing first in a game. Luukkonen has 0 goals saved above expected. He also has a -0, I guess. Lyon, -0.6. And for Ellis, -1.5 goals saved above expected. So Buffalo's goaltending has been mediocre this season according to the analytics, which I'm sure for people who watch the games would say, yeah, pretty much adds up. Coach Lindy Ruff. Lindy Ruff is clearly frustrated. He's doing everything he can. I don't think this is a coaching issue, but it could be a GM issue. Kevin Adams is still the general manager here. I don't know how much longer we're going to see Kevin Adams as the general manager for Buffalo. But then the question becomes, let's just say they fire Adams tomorrow. Who takes over that job, and how do you fix it? What do you do? Everybody's been moved. Everything's been changed. And we're still looking at a Buffalo team that's just not quite good enough. Then you get to Florida. 25 games, 12-12-1 record, so 25 points, 500 points percentage. Their injury list, we know Kachuk's on that list. We know Barkov's on that list. Barkov likely doesn't come back until the playoffs. Lustarinen's on that list too. And Lusterinen is a good third-line forward who has played top 6 minutes for them this season with the injuries that they've had. Now, their next 3 are at home against Nashville, Columbus, and the Islanders. None of those 3 teams, of course, above the playoff line. So that should work, although they just lost against Toronto 4-1, and that was a home game. Then they go on the road for 4. And this is a tough 4-game road trip for Florida against Utah, Colorado, Dallas, and Tampa. What's interesting is they're still given pretty good odds. According to Money Puck, 41.4% chance they make the playoffs. And according to The Athletic, a 52% chance Florida makes the playoffs, which tells you that their remaining strength of schedule probably not as difficult as the other teams they're chasing. The Florida Panthers are expected to just turn things around. Now, in the first period, they've scored 23 goals. They've allowed 23. In the second period, they've scored 25 and allowed 23. And in the third period, they've scored 27 and allowed 34. In overtimes, nothing's happened. No goals for, no goals against during 3-on-3. If they score first, they're 9-3 on the season. If they trail first, 3-9-1. So scoring first is important, as I've said numerous times in this video. Tarasov, 1.9 goals saved above expected. Bobrovsky, negative 1.5 goals saved above expected. So Tarasov's given them good work as the backup. Bobrovsky, not quite where we expect him to be. But it is one of those things where we just expect Florida to get better. Even the models expect Florida to get better and make the playoffs. We'll see if that ends up being the case. Paul Maurice, of course, still the coach. He's the coach for as long as he wants to be. They've won back-to-back Stanley Cups, so that gives you a lot of job security. Ask Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh how long he had job security before now being the Rangers coach. And not only does it give you job security, but it means that if you do end up out of work, you may not be out of work for very long. General manager Bill Zito. For my money, the best general manager in the league, I believe, is Bill Zito. And it's part of the reason why I have no concern that Florida is going to miss the playoffs. So I do want to touch on the teams that are above the playoff line before we wrap this video up. The Tampa Bay Lightning, 16-8-2, 34 points, 654 points percentage. Pretty safe. I talked about this in the standings video the other day as well. Montreal, 14-9-3, 31 points, 596 points percentage. Montreal has had a shaky last, 5-6 weeks? So Montreal may very well be vulnerable to one of the teams below the line here. Ottawa, 13-9-4, 30 points, 577 points percentage, which is barely above the 574 put up by the Islanders. But keep in mind, that's third place in the Atlantic. So the team that's chasing down third place is actually Detroit, who have a 556 points percentage. Then we get over to the Metro side. The Capitals, 17-9-2, 36 points. They've won 6 in a row, 643 points percentage. Right up there with Tampa. They look quite comfortable atop the division, although Carolina has a better points percentage. 16-7-2 record, 34 points, 680 points percentage for Carolina. Philadelphia, 15-8-3, 33 points, 635 points percentage. There will be a lot of people who expect Philadelphia to drop back as the season goes along. That may end up happening, but yeah, Tocchet hasn't playing pretty well right now. They're playing some intense hockey, and they're getting goals by the bunches, so who knows? New Jersey, now the number one wild card, 16-10-1, 33 points, 611 points percentage. So still better than anything on the board, but it does feel like New Jersey's trending in the wrong direction. And the longer that Jack Hughes is out, the more likely it is that New Jersey finds themselves on the wrong side of the playoff line rather than the right. Then you got Pittsburgh, 13-7-5, 31 points, 620 points percentage for them. Playing pretty well. So I think it's interesting to note that the Metro is doing quite well, and the Atlantic not necessarily. Your bottom 3 teams in the East are the Atlantic. 4 of the bottom 5 teams in the East are in the Atlantic. Now, yes, Boston's still tied in points with Detroit and the Rangers, but it's just one of those things that's interesting and noteworthy, and we'll see if it continues to be the case throughout the season. So, my question is, of the teams that are currently below the playoff line in the East, which one do you think has the best chance of making the playoffs? I'll go first. It's Florida. So, yeah, Florida I still think has the best chance, but it may very well be that back-to-back Stanley Cup, the three straight finals appearances, and the fact that that finals appearance in 2023, they didn't have a very good regular season that year, and yet still went on quite the run once we got to April, May, and June. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It's greatly appreciated. I will talk to you again soon.